This is Gaia's Revenge, JT33. We are live 4/22/2024, and today is Glerf Day, for those of you who believe in the globe. And look, I'm not really here to debate it, but I'm happy to take calls on this. So if you're concerned about the state of the so-called globe, we can discuss it. I put a question in the outgoing email. So if you got notifications, and those of you subscribed, I appreciate it. Go to ips.monster or sign up at Patreon. I put a question in there, and if you want to call in and answer the question, I asked, does Earth even exist as an object separate from the universe? Because this premise that it needs to be saved needs to be challenged on this basis. I mean, what if we do live in a sim? What if it's just a realm, unending? Either of these scenarios would preclude the need to pay a tithe to the Church of Global Warming. And today is also, of course, the day that we commemorate the sacrifice of Einhorn, the unicorn killer, who composted his girlfriend as a sacrifice to Gaia. And in his name, we celebrate Earth Day is it every the 22nd? Or is it just the last month? It's the third Monday, whatever it is. Today is Glerf Day or Earth Day again. And we'll start with a few different topics today. Phones are open, 505-349-0420. If you're not familiar with it, the Earth Day was actually started by Ira Einhorn, which means unicorn, and he composted his girlfriend. 18 months later, they found her in a trunk in his closet. That's kind of the story. That's how Earth Day got its start. That's green, recycling, composting your ex. Joined by Diana South, HBIC, Peace Circle 360, P Triple Jungle Gem Thirst. Oh, Mango Penguins is here. Appreciate it. Just realized something here too. We've been digging deep into this Burning Man thing, and I hope you're not all burnt out on it. We've been talking about these scenarios for some time. Aaron Bushnell, and then this new guy, Maxwell Azrello. And we have found quite a lot to substantiate the idea that this thing is purely theater. And we've also come across the types of what they call Zeljo. There are materials that stuntmen use so they can put themselves on fire, and this includes stuff that puts your skin on fire. And this would explain why Maxwell's hair looked really greasy and gelled down, whereas it was kind of flowing on his video in his car. He was coated in Zeljo. So that's what it looks like. It looks like a stunt, and what we always look to analyze here is this fakeable? Before we even, quite, like, some things are fakeable, maybe on a small scale, but in terms of visual effects, could this be faked live convincingly? And when we say live, we also have to account for the fact that they can insert pre-existing footage into a live news feed, or even another layer, for example, CGI planes. CGI planes apparently melt steel beams. Unless you believe it was real planes, and maybe it was chemtrail juice, but whatever it is, they can insert anything. And this is all on the assumption that they have a closed movie set, just sitting there, just kind of like you'd think it's anyone could be there as witnesses, but no, actually it's like a guerrilla, kind of like maybe more like, I guess, a flash mob type situation. Everybody's there, they do their piece, they record it, and they upload it. But anyway, we'll go into that because we've come across quite a bit again to substantiate the idea that this thing was just an elaborate psyop, and then we'll discuss why. What is the purpose behind it? I mean, there are a lot of people questioning this event, and a lot of them just get stuck on the question of why would they do this? Why would they lie? And I say it's kind of naive, and the question, why would they lie, isn't an argument against the fact that it's a lie, but that's how people use it. It's kind of an argument from ignorance. I can't think of any reason why they would lie, therefore they're not lying. Well, how's that working for you? How do you like having your head in that box, totally constrained and blinkered? So this is something called protective granulate. Use this granulate powder to mix protective gel used for protecting exposed skin from extreme heat or open flame. Use as a protective layer with fire-resistant undergarments. And that's from stunt360.com. Naked burn gel. So these are called naked burn gels, and the way it works, this premium product is specially designed for the purpose of creating long burns directly on the skin, so-called naked burns. Our product, FireSkin 360, comes with our extensive professional guidance and experience. Our gel is one of a kind and mixed on order, but we keep full stock. And I have a video here to demonstrate this, but the point of it is, if you didn't know this existed, you might not have known that the event was even fakeable. And most of the analysis outside of pure auto hoaxers and media critics is assuming it was real. And there are some people who are analyzing the symbolism and they're saying, oh, it was real, it was a human sacrifice. I wouldn't leap to that conclusion. So, a few reasons why I think it's fake, just kind of off the cuff. The ambulance driver took a close up shot of the guy's face and gave it to Laura Loomer. Major privacy violation, probably illegal. Then, of course, Zell Gel, the special effects are 100% achievable. And then you're getting footage from CNN. So you can't know if it's live. They can insert clips. They can insert a 5-second clip. Again, think planes on 9/11. So I have no reason to believe it's real at face value, considering who it's coming from, pathological liars, and then, of course, its proximity to the Trump trial. And the Trump trial has multiple linkages with the Burning Man theme. For example, you can't separate Trump right now from Waco. And this was on the anniversary of the burning of Waco. And at Waco, they burned a 33-year-old named Dave Koresh, who they thought was Jesus. They're the cult. There, Timothy McVeigh was inspired, and he blew up the Oklahoma City bombing on the same date. And he too was executed by the state at 33 by electrocution. Both of these individuals are going against the state, going against government. This Maxwell Azarello had his whole manifesto about how the government's been taken over by the super rich and we have to go against the system. It's a fascist coup. So he had this message that was very much like Joker, which is this kind of class warfare, but more about overthrowing the system, revolution. His last video was about revolution. And if you remember, the shirt he was wearing, hanging out with Newt Gingrich, said "Eat the Rich." And the Joker movie was plastered with the messaging "Kill the Rich." And the messaging behind his manifesto was basically the rich are the ones who are screwing everybody. Now, in his manifesto, he references Aaron Bushnell. Remember Aaron Burning Bushnell? Another fake Burning Man? So it's unlikely that a real event is inspired by a fake event. And even just on that note, it's unlikely anybody could be inspired to hurt themselves for such a tepid, weak manifesto. Like, who cares about Peter Thiel? I could understand an environmentalist setting themselves on fire, and one of them tried, and he barely got his arm even scorched. But the idea that somebody would have to do this to make a statement, it's like you got a Substack, you have free speech. And when has a movement ever been really kicked off by somebody setting themselves on fire? But anyway, he referenced a fake event, so I'm suggesting that these are part of a continuum. And CNN was there ready to, I guess, in a very performative way, describe what was happening in real time and what it smelled like since you wouldn't be able to see it. That's all just part of the theater. So I'm not inclined to think that they just happened to be there to report on it and that this is the first time they've told the truth. They're not doing a psyop this time, honest. Honest, right? But something else too, we looked at another clip where they pull the guy up onto the gurney by his ankles and his wrists, and one person analyzing the video suggested that with the types of burns that he had, it might have just pulled his skin right off. So the whole thing is questionable. And it's a fair question to ask, is it even real? Based on just what we've provided thus far, and we just scratched the surface. But you got Waco, Oklahoma, Dave Koresh, Tim McVeigh, martyrs fighting the government, the rich versus poor fascist takeover thing. And then we can tie in some other stuff. He came from St. Augustine. And St. Augustine was burned by Sir Francis Drake. And interestingly enough, in his manifesto about the rich and he's anti crypto, the Copenhagen, the oldest stock exchange, is there in Copenhagen, burned. And they called its spire the Dragon's Tail. So, like, wait, Dragon's Tail? Burning, the financial connection, and then this guy from St. Augustine burning. So, there's some dragon kind of linkages here with the fire, dragon fire burning, the economic system. But more interestingly, this more recent spire burns almost to the day on the anniversary of the Notre Dame spire burning. There's a couple of parallels there. But what we're getting at here is the timing of it, which is again tied with conflagration of Waco and Oklahoma City, suggestive to me of some kind of pagan undertones beneath all of the surface here. And we're getting close to May Day, Beltane fires, and of course you can't separate the Burning Man from the symbol of the phoenix. And the connections here between the Joker movies have to be mentioned, because the Joker movie, Kill the Rich, was played by Joaquin Phoenix, and the imagery, as I discussed the other day, shows him walking with the backdrop of fire, like a walking phoenix. The name Phoenix very significant because the previous Batman died. We're talking about Heath Ledger, and Heath Ledger had his 44th birthday on 4/4, the day that Trump was arraigned last year. Interestingly, Joker 2 was being filmed right outside. So Joker 2 filmed outside the courthouse. Fast forward here, and you can't separate Joker and Batman from the present political narratives. It's there in the subtext. The Batman movie was all about the right wing. The Riddler was Q, sending his radicals to blow up the dam and flood the polls. Meanwhile, the GOP's midterm a slogan was flood the polls. So there's a Batman Joker connection between the parties. We've described this stuff at length. So the fact that Joker 2 is being filmed there, that's a big deal. Now, fast forward to this event. Trump's there inside praying. And this guy outside Burns, his last name is the same last name as a DC Comics writer who did this Batman comic, and the Joker on there has a mugshot that looks like this guy's mugshot. These aren't specious connections here. The Copenhagen Tower, as I showed you, had a DC Comics Batman logo on the outside. So there's a narrative, what I would call a continuous or contiguous narrative that blends the entertainment media with what happens on the world stage. Sort of like what we've been describing for some time, and this isn't new when it comes to Batman movies and connections with real-time events. That Batman movie came out on the day that Joker Sarnev from the Boston bombing had his death penalty reinstated. March 4th, 2022. His death penalty is reinstated. Joker Sarnev. It's too perfect. It's scripted. These aren't coincidences. And I got something else to bring up here, and this is from a Fakeologist drew attention to this. It has to do with the day of the JFK assassination, and I'll get to this. It shows you how the day of the assassination, the news media was reading accounts of previous presidential assassinations and why the president needs to be protected at all times. And it's like, this is leading up to it. Predictive programming isn't just in the movies by artists who might be inspired by a higher power, as some have asserted. It's in the news. It's just an integrated part of the whole. It's part of the integrated whole. It's not like it's anomalous. It's actually standard operating procedure. But again, the mugshot resemblances, the last names with the writer, again, as Rello. Joker starts a revolution. In the Joker movie, he starts a revolution to kill the rich. So there's all that. And then Maxwell, his final words calling for a revolution. So now, the dragon's tail, the Copenhagen Stock Exchange burning, what is the significance there? If you might remember, Heath Ledger burns a pyramid of money, discussing how Gotham deserves a better class of criminal. Well, what he's suggesting here is they're not doing it for money. They're destroying the financial system itself. And class of criminal, class warfare reference again. So there's quite a lot here just there within the storylines to suggest that this entire thing is part of this continuous narrative. Let me catch up on comments and then we'll continue on. And phones are open, by the way. Happy Glerf Day. Joined by Aries 1, Lean Dion, Frank Murr. Elephant Tusk says, if my consciousness isn't watching IPS, does it still exist? Yes. Reality exists. The world stage is a mental construct that doesn't exist. However, we operate through our minds, primarily through our filter of our past experiences, our training, our education, our frame of reference, which is stacked way too heavily in favor of the consensus view. So it trumps your own. We're trained to lean on the consensus view as portrayed on the screen. Let that override your own perceptions. It's the digital hoodwink, it's a veil. And I've been saying that, it may be telling you the truth every time you look at it. Maybe it is. Or a truth. Maybe it is a glimpse. But even then, its frame of reference is demonstrably built upon an edifice of lies. Everyone on there is speaking from the same perspective, the same blinkered frame of reference that conceals far much more than it reveals, and it excludes quite a lot. So much of this false paradigm building is done by excluding and ignoring more than just total contrivances. Okay, let's continue. And one more point here. I think it's important that we hang on to objective reality. There's no reason to let that go. There's no reason to argue against it if you're going to contest what's happening on the news. It's like, well, I think the news is fake, but reality's fake. Okay, well, if reality's fake, then who cares about the news? It's irrelevant at that point. And I think that what we have to recognize is that there are augmentations to our world that we could call superstitions or even better, hyperstitions. And do these serve us, or are they in some way constraining us, limiting us? Are they just used there to keep us in a state of ignorance, perhaps blissful ignorance, in order to be, I don't know, manipulatable by the power elite? And that's what I would suggest. I mean, it's one of two things. Either we're being jacked into a system and harvested like a bunch of matrix batteries, or we happen to be lucky enough to be born into a benevolent dictatorship that found a way to tame our worst aspects. I mean, it's not perfect yet, but they're making the effort to create some kind of global safe space. Like, are we entering the safe space age? That's a distinct possibility. Kind of fits with the MO, but we'll see. Let's continue. Because I mean, look, you could argue that there's benevolent dictatorship, but like in the movie The Village suggests, it's at the expense of what? What are you giving up in exchange? Living in a dream, or possibly a nightmare. Got a message from Plain Decoded. It says, did Tim cover the Tucker Carlson Joe Rogan episode? It solidifies how much of a disinformation Tucker Carlson really is, and how much of a pseudo intellectual dumbass Joe Rogan is. I wonder if Tucker Carlson knows he's a disinfo agent or if he's just a dumbass as well. Speaking of Tucker, the Riddler, who laughs like, well, if you look at the old Riddler, he has a laugh that is very distinctive and it sounds like Tucker, and it may not be a coincidence, but it is notable that the Riddler's weapon of choice is called a Tucker. And they're like, oh, look, the killer killed the mayor. What was his weapon? A Tucker. And this is at the same time that you have that shooting at the supermarket in Buffalo. And they said Tucker sent the shooter because he was hyping up this idea of replacement theory. So this white kid thinks, oh, we're being replaced. And he goes down to a black neighborhood and shoots up a bunch of people in a grocery store. And they blame Tucker. So Tucker was the weapon. He radicalized them online. They love to play with these memes and create these correlations. And I even noted this before. Joker does correspond to the left, the trodden, the underclass, the oppressed, fighting the rich. He's on the subway, which represents the underclass, and he shoots some rich guys, and then he becomes a hero. I would even say that the mask in that movie, the Joker mask, the clown paint, represents the idea that the system creates clowns out of everybody, and the clowns are now rebelling. They put on the masks and they rebel. Followed by 2020, the Batman movie comes from the other side, where Batman is on the subway beating up the Jokers, the clowns. So Batman is more like Patriot Front, right wing extremist on that side of the political horseshoe, and Joker's like Antifa and the chaos agents on the left. But they represent the poles. And this goes back, the symbolism goes back. I mean, you go back to Batman, his grandfather, founding the Skull and Bone Society, the symbol of the bat itself, Bat as Phoenix, as portrayed by Christopher Nolan, foreshadowing both COVID and the nuke to come. I'm guessing 2025 based on Christopher Nolan's inference in Dark Knight Rising. But again, Bat 2020 was the catalyst. And we just had Bat Appreciation Day. In fact, it was on Bat Appreciation Day that the Copenhagen fire happened. Aries 1 says, are there no God enjoyers here? God might be okay. Based on the books that supposedly speak for him, I would say not really. He seems kind of bipolar and dangerous. But his followers are to be mostly, I think, kept at a distance. Social distancing. I mean, which God are you talking about? We also have to ask that. Some kind of self-serving construct that allows you to be some kind of a judge of everyone around you, or are you going strictly by the Abrahamic concept, or is it Gaia? I mean, today is Glerf Day, and the god of the age is Gaia. Elephant Tusk says, be careful what you ingest as entertainment. The effects on the subconscious mind is detrimental. Most do realize just how much this affects your thinking and creations. Absolutely. I refer to predictive programming and concurrent programming as ways that they build your mental framework in your imagination for what they're going to put into the news later. And I think that Kubrick gave us a hint with the title of Eyes Wide Shut, that your subconscious is eyes wide shut, it takes in everything. And that your eye, your ego is really a filter. If you could mentally catalog everything that you're experiencing as you're experiencing it, it'd be like a nonstop acid trip. It wouldn't be coherent. So you're filtering down to something that you can, organize. But that doesn't mean everything else isn't being processed on some level. And so I am very aware of the programming we're taking in. And that's why I refer to this thing as a metascript. We're looking at the zeitgeist, which is what they're painting up. What's the big picture? And this is an accurate way. I mean, if you ask me, if you want to try to see what the future is, the map is looking at the past, at the predictive programming as a predictive model because that's how it's been used this entire time. Joined by X322. Thanks for joining. Mango Penguin says CNN is the worst kind of entertainment. It's entrainment. Yeah, the word entrainment, we're talking about propaganda. Entertainment is actually a form of propaganda, and its entertainment value is just a side effect. And a lot of people enjoy that side effect, but they ignore the main part of it. And it is entraining you to certain narratives and themes, and it's kind of, in a way, conditioning you. And I was listening to something today, I gotta find this, but someone was describing how it's more difficult to break your conditioned responses than even, quote, addictions. And they were just describing how conditioning itself is just this passive way of getting yourself habituated to something to where it's almost worse than a physical addiction. Elephant Tusk says reality manifests from the subconscious mind, and if one's behavior and beliefs are entirely built on this structure. I would argue this, though. They are working on our minds to influence our behaviors and helping us to create this version of reality, but I think it's idealism. They cannot match it. Belief does not create reality. If it did, moon landings would be real. It doesn't work that way. The best they can do is try to get you to adopt their false paradigm and remain in their box so you never test its boundaries, and then they teach everyone to be hostile to people who go beyond its boundaries. I mean, remember, auto hoaxer was a pejorative. Truthers always hated auto hoaxers. They hate them. They hate them more than they hate the mainstream. They argue against the mainstreamers, but they're trying to recruit them. But you notice they hate the auto hoaxers. And that kind of reminds me of apostates in various faiths, where the religions would rather you be untouched, a heathen that they can convert, than someone who joined and then later walked away. Because now you know their secrets. Now you've rejected them. Yes, Elephant Tusk says repetition is key to programming and reprogramming. Exactly. Yeah, Mango says, did you hear about the debris falling from space? A piece of space junk hit some house in Florida, if you believe it. If you find it believable, it came from JAXA. And it wasn't new, it was from a few years ago, and then it dropped. And people will believe anything if it comes from the approved source, but I have a serious proposition here. I'm thinking, like, maybe even as a psyop. People used to stage UFO sightings all the time. Vegas, I think like a year ago or 2 years ago, someone was like reporting about how they saw an alien in the backyard, and the news covered it, and the police were there. And I'm just thinking, why isn't this guy recording the 12-foot tall aliens in his backyard? He's on the phone. It's like, yeah, I'm looking at them right now. It's kind of humanoid. It's like, why are you calling the cops? They don't do anything anyway. You should be recording it. But anyway, I was going to say, um, let's say you just took some chunks of metal and punched a hole in your roof and then put the metal on the ground, called the news, and said, look, space junk. Do any of these Glerfs have a basis for saying you're lying? Aren't they just required to believe all this stuff? Aren't they just supposed to accept it on faith? It's like, oh, you're suddenly going to have standards of evidence. You're suddenly going to question, is this real space junk? Since when do you question anything from the space agencies? So I'm suggesting maybe we ought to, as an experiment, let's stage space junk and report it to the news and leave it on them to tell us it's not real. Let's just put the burden of proof on them unfairly. Just like NASA. Like, oh, look, we got moon rocks. Like, it's petrified wood. But if you say it's petrified wood, they attack you. So you're like, yeah, it's moon rocks, fine. Moonwood. The idea here, though, of course, isn't that the moon's made of wood. It means that they're lying and they're presenting false evidence, but you can't question it because it's sacrosanct. And I'm suggesting we could fake space junk and they wouldn't dare question it because they can't question their false reality. It would crumble. We must be onto something good right now because it's buffering for some people. And I've noticed this happens quite a bit. So if there's a really good idea, it'll start buffering. And that's usually the time I have to write down the idea. And if it's, well, anyway, let's move on. Phones are open 505 349 0420. It is Glerf Day 2024. Now, I want to point out, too, about playing Decoded. He's talking about Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan. These guys are not dumb. They're not stupid. They're both playing very calculated roles. They're playing in a controlled dialectic, and they both know it's fake. They're very aware of what they're doing. So it's really important not to think that these people are dumb or to underestimate them. They get these astronauts out there, and yeah, it's a clown show. But the people behind the scenes are professionals. This is uh, mind control at its finest. So they know it's a fake dialectic. Joe argues that the alien technology that's been disclosed is it really from a secret government project. And Tucker says, no, it's aliens, but they're spiritual beings and they're evil. So now they're debating for several hours just what is it? Government technology or evil aliens? And they back and forth, and all the listeners just spellbound. Oh, it must be one of the two. That is such an old conversation. Stale, old Mirageman. There's a documentary called Mirageman. It goes deep into this, how the Air Force actually planted these ideas to discredit the witnesses. But while they're sitting here going back and forth debating whether it's aliens or the government, they never question whether the thing itself even happened. Then they talk about 9/11. Was it an inside job? Or was it just like the MSM said? So Joe Rogan's arguing for the mainstream. Tucker now is, he's really speaking some truth here. He's like, well, maybe it was an inside job. It's like none of them will ever approach the idea that it was a perception management, psychological operation, creation of a contemporary myth. Nobody died. They couldn't go there. They would never go there. They're not allowed to. Their purpose is to prevent you from going too far. And we've gone too far. Neither would argue that this was a psychological operation. This is how they control debates. It's not idiocy, it's an act. And they think their listeners are idiots. Listen to this. Space.com. We did the math. Turns out that a little more than half a penny of every federal dollar ends up at NASA. And look, I believe that NASA is there to control inner space, your mind space, the world view, and your world concept is what sets the boundaries. It creates scarcity, it creates their game board. So that's their job. It's not to take you to some distant paradise in the future. That's a false utopianism. And it's actually designed to sell you on slavery. They want to sell you on space communism. Look at the book Red Star from 1908. This is an old project. Sell them on this perfect vision and then realize it here on Earth. And it's space communism. And again, communism, when I say it, I mean lowercase c. It just means lose all your property, become a drone, we've analyzed some of the NASA propaganda that shows these workers on Mars, and it's just like looks just like classic old Soviet space communist propaganda. But anyway, NASA takes one half of every penny of every federal dollar of tax money that goes. This is crazy. This means that a family with a median household income of $49,000, according to the U.S. Census, which pays $6,629 in federal taxes, pays the space agency. Anyone care to guess? How much does a family with a median household income pay NASA in its taxes every year? $33. That would be correct. $33. Nope, 33. But still, that's how much. In fact, Buzz Aldrin was paid $33 to go to the moon. Yep. U.S. government reimbursed Buzz Aldrin $33 for his trip to the moon for, quote, travel expenses. And this was a cost to drive his own car to the location. This is 1969. We have the actual paperwork here. $33, which would be $215 in today, but this is travel expenses to drive out to Ellington Air Force Base in Houston. Now, he didn't have to pay it out of pocket, I think, but anyway, goes on to say that this was a reimbursement. We'll move on here. Ryler05 says, is everybody ready for the plasma apocalypse? I think it's happening. I think it's already happening based on the amount of reports that this is buffering. Let me see if the 5G tower has melted. All right, moving on. Buzz Aldrin had kind of a meta-scripty name. I think his mother's maiden name. Anyone care to guess? What is the maiden name of Buzz Aldrin's mother? First name Marion. What was her last name? Anybody? Marion Moon. Just a coincidence. Just like it's a mere coincidence that Werner von Braun wrote Mars, a Technical Tale about an Elon who would colonize Mars. These are just coincidences. Lesko says Mason. Nope. Well, I mean, look, we're looking at the symbolism of just what I would consider to be the mystery school of NASA. I mean, yeah, NASA's there for mind control, perception management, but behind it all, it is the ancient, I think. It's sort of a scientific, or rather science fiction version of Mystery Babylon, like these so-called ancient mystery schools. And I think it's beyond just decoration. When you go to the esoteric part, the names of the dead gods, I think they are actually worshiping something. I even go so far as to say that the rockets are obelisks, and this is all veneration of the Earth God, which is relevant, today being Glerf Day, and to see the ball Earth in its entirety, one would have to climb into one of these obelisks named after a dead sun god and fly very high up to see it. And then you can see your ball Earth, which incidentally, one of the names of the Earth god is Baal. A lot of people are talking about the red heifer that's about to be sacrificed, so we'll keep up with that. I'm kind of let down by the whole eclipse prophecy, and now people are glomming onto this red heifer. It's like at some point these prophets need to realize that, you know what, um, you got it wrong. And I've been calling out some of these prophets here and there. It's getting pretty bad with the JFK crew, which we'll get into. I want to catch up on notes. We've gone pretty deep into this Burning Man thing, and there's more to add to it. Speaking of cannibalism, I kind of missed this the other day. We were talking about cannibalism around the world, Haiti, Russia, Los Angeles, and then Crocus, Russia had the guy eating his own ear. But there was a story floating around here where Joe Biden claims his uncle was eaten by cannibals. And this has kind of created some kind of controversy, I suppose, because it's politically incorrect, even though cannibalism was reported to have happened in these regions. But let me play this clip.
He lost his life. It's not. Look, I'm not. We should not make jokes about
It's
this.
not.
Oh, wait.
President
Wait.
Biden said
No,
that his
no.
uncle was eaten by
I mean,
cannibals.
your last line. It's for a laugh. It's for.
Okay, now what we're catching on to here is it Steve Ducey? He's asking questions about Joe Biden's uncle, who was shot down in the war and then was eaten by cannibals.
And I agree. Second Lieutenant Ambrose J. Finnegan was a war hero, but the Pentagon says, for unknown reasons, the plane was forced to ditch in the ocean. Both engines failed at low altitude. Why is President Biden saying he was shot down? There's no evidence of that. And why is he saying that his uncle was eaten by cannibals? That is a bad way to go.
He lost.
Anyway, they try to explain it away. His uncle eaten by cannibals. They couldn't answer it correctly, and then I think there was some blowback over these claims of cannibalism, as there has been. And many of the claims about cannibalism from Haiti turned out to be just psyops. Not mainstream media psyops, but gangs psyoping other gangs to intimidate them into thinking that they're cannibals, which is excellent when you think about it from a psychological operation perspective. Like, I often wonder if Vlad the Impaler, the inspiration for Dracula, Vlad Tepes, if did he really impale a bunch of people and then decorate the countryside, or was that even a psyop? And there were rumors that he would impale people and dine beneath their bleeding corpses, dipping his bread in their blood. And you can find these woodcuts, but I thought, that could just be a rumor. I mean, rumors like this really do have an effect, and most people are just operating off of rumors. Look how many people find the Q thing believable, and Hillary Clinton wearing the face of dead children, etc. Okay, let's see here. G33, that was funny what Ducci asked about it. Yeah, I just thought it was strange that the timing of it, all this talk about cannibalism. And this sounds like a bunch of made up BS. James O'Keefe is platforming this individual that claims to be a survivor of MK Ultra child abuse by the elite. It's kind of like Ryan Garcia and his story about being um, basically satanically abused by a bunch of elite at the Bohemian Grove. Like, there's a lot of this stuff going around, and at this point, it's gross. The CT Survivor 17 says, when I was a child, I was brought into a basement. I was being blanked. This happened, gross, gross. If you don't do it, I'll kill your family, gross, gross. And I'm like, this is actually some sick fan fiction involving children, accompanied by crayon drawings. And James O'Keefe is covering this. James O'Keefe, who went to the Bohemian Grove recently. So I'm suggesting that this trivializes real problems, and this is smut, and it's gross, and it's tantamount to creating abuse content. And someone said you shouldn't criticize it till you've read his manifesto or you've read his book. And it's like, I don't know why people are telling me this. Like, how can you criticize Maxwell Azarello until you've read his Substack? It's like, because he set himself on fire. Now his manifesto deserves special consideration. I don't think so. Give me the TLDR. Let me play this clip here. We're all very much familiar with this concept of predictive programming, but I think we've taken it to the next level of adding clarity to it by describing it as news bending. Just like the play Newsbenders from the 60s, where they write the news 5 years in advance. And if you think I'm crazy for saying they write the news in advance, explain to me what happens every time they do a psyop and how that's not writing the news in advance in every way. On this day, in this year, we're going to have these actors portray this role, and these agencies will be involved, and it'll be on the news like this, and then we will be able to have this agenda implanted into the public mind, and now it's a thing. Now we can sue and regulate and create this back and forth political spectacle over it. They do it all the time. Every psyop is a news story, written in advance, inserted into the historical timeline. So this is how they write history. My point being, predictive programming is not eerie coincidences. You cannot explain it away by saying it's some higher power. It's obviously standard operating procedure. Now, how far in advance do they write these things? I would say 50 years, 100 years, or longer. Not an extraordinary claim. When was War of the Worlds? How far back have we been entertained with the idea of some kind of a alien invasion, which I would contend is just a repackaging of the Rapture story. But War of the Worlds, H.G. Wells, written between 1895 and 1897, more than 100 years. So, with that in mind, we're very familiar with the idea of dollar bills and how you can fold them up and how they represent various future events. And in sequence, it's really hard to deny that this is um, a phenomenon. It's not apophenia. There are connections here that are undeniable. But let me play some clips. But then I want to skip to the end because there's a part I hadn't seen before.
And this is the problem. Nobody really does. But folks, when I lay out a clear, absolute clear, you cannot dispute this with the money that I have in front of me. There's no way to dispute this at all. You follow the track right now with me, and you look at when you fold an airplane, a paper plane with your money, and you go from the $1 bill to the $100 bill, okay? And listen to me when I say this, okay? I just showed you at the beginning of this video on Google that they redesigned the money in 1996. They started with the $100 bill, and then they moved on to the 50, and then the 20, and then the 10. And it goes 1996, 1997, 1998, and then in 2000 they were done with the redesign. Folks, this is undisputable. They executed a plan that was already planned. Okay, here's the 1 to the 5. The towers are hit. The buildings are falling.
He's showing how 5, 10, 20 is sequential art for the Twin Towers being reduced to ash.
The buildings are gone. And all there's left is smoke.
5, 10, 20, 100. But then he goes further here, and this is the more interesting one to me, because it seems to foreshadow 2020 and even the mask.
Themselves from the truth. And you ready for this, folks? If I take the $20 bill right now and I fold it like such in front of you, and this is the mind blower, okay? You tell me what you see when I fold this $20 bill. I'm going to fill the whole. I'm going to cut off his head a little bit here. Do you see a guy wearing a mask? Is there a guy wearing a mask?
So flipping the 20 over, it looks like Andrew Jackson is wearing a mask. And in the same image there, you have 20 and 20.
Is that Andrew Jackson upside down, but they made his head bigger because they want him to wear a mask? And what year did they want him to wear a mask? Oh, look at that. 20.
That's interesting. And I would point out, too, that Stanley Kubrick's body of predictive programming in 2001 Space Odyssey seems to, foreshadow 2020. I'm sorry, 2001, and does foreshadow 2020. But if you look at 9/11 at Ground Zero, there's a lot of firemen wearing masks for obvious reasons. And that came in the wake, of course, Eyes Wide Shut about the masks. And so the masks have some very special significance outside of its medical application. And it's a ritual garb. We've discussed this stuff at length. But Eyes Wide Shut, when you're wearing a mask, I think it's symbolic of your programmable state, where you're just purely receiving information. Your subconscious is downloading it. It's going in through your eyes, you're being programmed, and you're not allowed to speak about the programming. That's part of the agenda, the silence, the censorship, etc., of being a passive receptacle to propaganda. Interesting, someone here mentions, J Dig says, did you see that Garcia said this was all an act for a fight? Yeah, I watched the fight, and then he put a crown on his head. I not really a huge fan of a lot of these boxers acting like they're gods because they won a fight. It's kind of overblown, but when he was doing this Me Too thing at Bohemian Grove, I was like, this guy's just doing it because he needs attention to get more money for his, obviously it's pay-per-view or something, because I never would have heard of him. I wouldn't know who Ryan Garcia is if he didn't make these outrageous claims. And I think he made $50 million, dollars, 12 million of it from a personal bet. So it's an excellent PR stunt. Good job. Lean Dion says in Fallout, notable that the Nuki burnt faces with the main villain, then we get roasted truffers, but they also have the bad guy eats another burnt man, and literally mentioned eating his neighbors, like Alex Jones. Yeah, that's big. All right, we're talking about the money. Plain Dakota says to write something 100 years in advance, they'd have to update it as new technology emerges to include in the story or predict or write the new tech or release it. Yes. See, I think you can write it in broad strokes. 100 years, a little more fine tune it in 50, and then 25, and then 10-year blocks, and then you adjust it depending on what's within the realm of possibility. And the realm of possibility is not about technological development. Will we be technologically capable of going to Mars by 2029? That is not what they're asking behind the scenes. They're asking, have we bullshit them enough? Will they buy it finally? Or do we have to push it back 10 more years? The limiting factor for how far we go into deep space is special effects at this point, and credulity. How credulous are we? And I think we're pretty close. I mean, they could probably send people to Mars tomorrow. Musk is talking about sending 1 million people. And really, again, it's not technology that's the barrier, it's belief. Hank G says, so the metascripting newsbenders speak to us through our currency. Oh, look at the $1 bill. What's on the back? Pyramid, all seeing eye, 1776, reference to, yeah, the birth of America, but also 1776 AL, the Masonic year, is the year the Tower of Babel's construction begins. So 1776 AD is 5776 AL, which is the height in inches of the Great Pyramid in Giza. So 5776 inches, year 5776 AL, 1776 America, 1776 Babylon. The One World Trade Tower, by the way, is 1,776 feet. And New York is Babylon. So what we're seeing here is yes, yes, they put the newsbenders speak to us through our currency, through the cartoons, through the comic books, the video games, the art, all the celebrity puppets, and through the products, through the Mountain Dew, the Simpsons. What don't they speak to us through? The sports. They speak to us through the sports. They speak to us through the politicians, obviously. So yeah, no, it's an immersive illusion. Let's see what else we have here. Ifepe says the $100 bill for the tsunami. Yeah, I've seen that. And if you look at the biggest cathedral in the world is the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York, and it has the pillars carved in the 90s that show a tsunami hitting New York with the Twin Towers being bowled over. So this is again an intentional representation of New York as Babylon. Jay Diggs says one of the Illuminati guys is really into origami. Yeah, I was thinking about this too earlier today, and I'm like, well, masons, architects, sacred geometry encoded into the cathedrals. When you get into it, it's on brand. It really is. We're talking about subliminals, and then beyond this, we're looking at magic, and by magic, I'm using it in their terms. But one of the famous axioms of magic, or one of the statements in Magic in Theory and Practice, is that the aspirant, the practitioner, is taught to read backwards and forward, and to reverse words, and of course, this is all part of, I think, perhaps reading, or rather interpreting multiple levels of messaging that your conscious mind will miss. You're going to read the obvious, but you may not see what's in the negative space. You may not see the occulted meanings. So when Aleister Crowley talks about writing backwards and reading backwards, yeah, well, we're looking at their techniques for encoding things. In Aleister Crowley's book Magic, one of his teachings is that you should learn to talk backwards, write backwards, thinking backwards. He encouraged magicians to play records backwards, so they became adept at thinking backward. Very interesting. And that's back in 1912? Okay, continuing. So the thing about the Garcia fight, he made it up for clicks. I can't hate on it. That is an excellent PR stunt. Look, Alex Jones did it. He claimed he went to Bohemian Grove and saw a human sacrifice. He didn't. He hyped it up. He basically sold it as a horror show, a satanic ritual, and it turns out no, it's just like a bunch of like overaged Boy Scouts. And Moloch's not even an owl. Moloch's a bull. Not that it's not sinister, but you have to look at it in context. We have a local event where they burn a man in Santa Fe, and I read that this is based on an older ritual of burning Judas. I'll look into it. This Bohemian Grove thing, if anything convincing comes out, that it's more than just a club to hang out in the summer and take a vacation with a bunch of. It's kind of partisan. I think if you're a Republican, you go to Burning Man. I mean, Bohemian, and lefties go to Burning Man. But it's the same thing. Overhyped. Okay, let's see what else. Going through your comments. Oh yeah, and look, Crowley's talking about this stuff long before subliminal advertising, subliminal programming. And we have no idea. Like, why would they limit that? Like, we know that they already use predictive programming. They use psychological operations. They use all kinds of unethical techniques. So there's no reason to put anything off limits. Got a picture here from our Discord server, thanks to Kevin Mooring. That's Rocky shaking somebody's hand. He's on fire. It says this photograph was taken at Warner Brothers Studios. At the time, it was Burbank Studios. The wind is blowing in the wrong directions, and the flames were forced into Rondell's face, burning his mustache. The two stuntmen changed positions, and the image was reversed. So the Burning Man special effects can be done over naked skin. We've talked about this. It's called Zalgel, and they've been doing this for decades. So again, just to remind you, everything that was reported the other day falls within the realm of fakeability. Ryla05 says a cult means pretty much anything that's not Christian. So yeah, the word occult, for the most part, we're talking about hidden, concealed stuff that has to be deciphered, and it's intrinsic to mystery schools, where you're looking at the exoteric version, but then when you're initiated, you're shown what's behind the mysteries. You're shown the light. And that's what we're in right now. And the people who think the news is real and that the worldview that we're given from the box is accurate, yeah, you've been hoodwinked. It's a digital hoodwink. And to de-occult it, to demystify it, is to recognize the existence of special effects, predictive programming, and our news-bent reality and what that means. The fact that the elite, just like this is 1984, and to exert the most amount of control, well, they write the history, and they act it out in advance. They actually implement it, you could say. But again, the idea that news is scripted in advance is demonstrated, and this is every time we look at predictive programming, by the existence of the perfect parallels between entertainment and news. And these are not coincidences. For years, they've been writing these things off. Oh, these are just coincidences. These are just eerie coincidences. Or this is apophenia. You're just noticing patterns. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. And these patterns matter. It's a reason why we went from, is this real or a false flag, to auto hoax. Fake until proven real. It's because the pattern was, it's fake until proven real. It's no longer a guess. I mean, think about it. NASA's going to launch a rocket tomorrow. Anyone here think it's going to be real? If every other previous one was fake, are we to operate as though, hey, the next one might be real? Let's just give them the benefit of the doubt with every new story. Hell no, we've moved past that. George Orwell said, those who control the present control the past, those who control the past control the future. Exactly. Plain Dakota says, I can barely think forward, now I gotta think backward. Minerva was the owl. Yes, uh, that's right. Not necessarily same thing. But they do burn someone. They do burn an effigy, the cremation of care. There is a burning man, speaking of the whole Burning Man thing. All right, let's continue. Going through my notes at minds.com/infinite plane society. Let me play this clip. This is Tucker Carlson, and he's talking to Joe Rogan. And anytime these individuals are talking, I just think of them as elitists who actually despise the people that they are propagating all this nonsense to. So here's Tucker Carlson telling you what he really thinks about power and how he thinks it should be exercised. It sounds like someone who believes in benevolent dictatorships.
Lived under those systems since there have been systems, but
Right, always.
what makes it particularly galling and hard to live with is when you call that system a democracy.
Right.
That's too dishonest for me. I would much rather live in a monarchy where everyone thinks the king has been assigned by God to rule over us and his whims are law. And, that
Right.
makes sense. I don't like it, but at least it has internal coherence.
So he'd rather live in a monarchy because of its internal coherence. He doesn't really like it, but it's internally coherent and it works. Keeps the peace, right? I would argue that the monolithic mind control apparatus of mass media intertwined with entertainment and government, what we're talking about every single day, this is monotheism. This is a monarchy. This also points to that one eye, on the dollar bill, the mono eye on the money. What is that? It's the one vision that we all are sharing for the purposes of coherence. Again, to refer to the movie The Village, the elders all agreed that this is the way the world is. It's evil out there, it's good here. There's monsters in the woods, nobody leaves. And as long as everybody played by those rules, yeah, it was really peaceful inside and everybody seemed happy. It's an agreed upon mass delusion. And he's arguing in favor of it. So it's like, I don't like it, but it's like, what about freedom? Okay, continuing. That was just Tucker Carlson, who I think, just in a moment of truth there, just what he really thinks. So here's a picture. It's called Sabret Hot Dogs. This is the actual hot dog stand behind the Burning Man. Unbelievable. Just the cannibalism thing. So this is just another eat the rich thing. We're talking about eat the rich, Joker, kill the rich. And of course, the Occupy movement is really, and they're kind of doing the Occupy thing now in a few places. They're attempting it with the Palestinian thing. The 99% to eat the 1%. So this is the theme here. So again, the guy's a Burning Man describing this scenario, the fascist coup. He's fighting against it, and he's roasting himself by a hot dog stand. And all the CNN reporters reported on the scent. They described how it smelled. And again, I think that's off. Like, really, there's something wrong with you if you're smelling burning flesh and you're not getting out of that area. Like, this is all theater, is what I'm saying. But another cannibalism reference. All right, we're getting some progress here. Now we have videos showing, now this is a misleading headline. Watch the damage done by the space junk below. NASA space junk Florida home video. So the video shows space junk object after it fell into their home, and it shows the family reacting to it. It's just crisis acting. You don't actually see the thing falling. No one is more surprised by the sight of space junk in his home than the resident Alejandro Otero. It was a 2-pound piece of hardware. Could have killed one of them. Space junk from 3. Now this is a picture of it or a video of it, just to make it seem a little more real. says, look at the charring on it, the heat, it burnt right through. So this doesn't make sense to me. I've seen a few examples of this. Like there was a councilwoman, a city councilwoman in Canada who was in bed and a piece of, I think it was a meteorite actually, went through her roof and landed on the pillow beside her bed. People reported a fireball. It's like, wait, it's a fireball that punches a hole through your roof, but then it lands on your pillow without burning it and doesn't bounce. Space junk crashed through the home's roof and floor. It's from USA Today, so you can believe it.
The charring on it.
Yeah.
The heat.
Burnt it through.
Doesn't look like a battery or anything, so we're good there.
You done with this end?
Oh yeah, it's right there. Is it hollow? Is it hollow?
Sort of,
through?
yeah.
But it's burnt. Oh yeah, and it has a.
Why are they even touching it and handling it? Honestly, I think the whole thing needs to be examined. It's so fake. The standards of belief, I mean, they'll believe anything. That's why I'm suggesting we should fake it, just to see. All right, let me play this. This is from Fakeologists Preparing the Public Mind for the Kennedy Assassination. Now, my point in bringing this up is that the morning that JFK was killed, he's about to give his talk, and for several minutes you have reporters talking about assassination. So this is two things. One, predictive programming. Two, it shows you that predictive programming is actually part of the bigger program. It's not separate. It's not coincidences. It's not random. It is standard operating procedure. And they've been doing this since the inception of mass media. This is again JFK's last public speech before he gets in the vehicle.
This is Ed Herbert at Hotel Texas, where 2,000 guests are awaiting the arrival of the president. Just about 30 seconds ago, the president finished a 10-minute appearance at the parking lot across the street from the hotel, and he is on his way up. We expect him to walk through this door at any moment. We've had several false starts, so to speak, that the president is coming. When he does, of course, there will be a large round of applause, and the Eastern Hills High School Band, 79 members, will break out with Hail to the Chief, so you'll have no doubt when he does arrive. When the president appeared out in the parking lot, he broke one of the cardinal rules of security. In fact, he broke it 2 or 3 times. He went out.
Now, here's where he's describing how the president has been breaking the security rules all day, and he's making Secret Service very nervous.
Into the crowd, and of course Secret Service men find this the most nervous time of any presidential appearance. As long as the Secret Service men can keep the crowd away from the president, they have a good chance of protecting him. But once he moves into a crowd, the Secret Service men are nearly immobilized in protecting him. Another rule is that anyone who approaches the president should have both hands visible and empty, and as you can tell in a crowd, there's no way to determine that. So whenever the president does move out into a crowd for handshaking...
I'll put a link. This is fakotube.com/video7011. Goes on for several more minutes. It's very conspicuous. And I'm just pointing this stuff out because the public mind was being saturated with this in advance so they would know how to interpret it. And this explains why there are so many movies right now about nukes and fallout and civil war and MAGA militias. They're preparing the public mind. Again, this is predictive programming in 1963.
And backslapping and exchanging pleasantries, he is always at the mercy of the crowd, and the Secret Service is at its least effective position. On September 6, 1901, those 2 rules were broken.
So he's reading from a history book about 1906. Some kind of, I think this was another assassination, and this is going through history for a few minutes about how assassinations happen.
And it ended in tragedy. That was the day that President William McKinley was appearing at the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York, and at a public reception, the crowd moved in around him, and the 3 Secret Service men who were guarding him had no chance to screen the people approaching him. Because it was a hot day, Secret Service also allowed persons to have handkerchiefs in their hands to wipe their perspiring brows. It just so happened that one of the thousands of handkerchiefs in that large hall covered a revolver in the hand of 28-year-old Leon Cholgos. He was an unemployed mill worker. He said he was an anarchist.
A political radical, an anarchist. So again, they're setting the stage. This goes on for a few more minutes. Not going to play it all, but you can get every link that we discuss here at ips.monster and just click on my minds.com account. Linda Curtis said media conspired. Absolutely, they were part of the production. And again, this is just reiterating something here about the nature of predictive programming and what it is. We have to demystify it. Illusion Warfare and X said, in the beginning, I said those missiles poking out of the ground looked like Looney Tunes cartoons, and they were just props and set dressings. And now this. So Lex Luthor posts this video from Twitter where it has a group of soldiers in Ukraine playing around with these dummy missiles. Apparently dummy missiles. They're literally swinging them around and just, yeah, they're props. It's a video of soldiers clowning around with dummy props and missiles that were scary just a couple years ago, but now they're just toys. And one of the points that Les Luthor consistently raises is how they give the public something tangible to interact with. So you feel like what's happening on the news is real. So you have a burnt out tank on the street here, you do some selfies with it, and now you've created propaganda. Now it's real. This is what is called hyperstition, a term I've been referencing lately because it's more than a superstition. You know, you could be superstitious about something, you never actually see it. A hyperstition is reinforced within a feedback loop because you're within a closed system, which the world stage, our worldview, is a closed system, and its parameters are defined by the MSM box. And within this system, anything they insert becomes, quote, real by our mass participation in it. And it's mostly through belief. And we are at a time where, you know, we are being inundated with stuff to believe in, and we fight over beliefs, but nobody's reality testing these beliefs. Something else, too, about Maxwell Azarello. For somebody exposing the Illuminati, he's sure comfy showing off their signs. One of his photos before he was, and look at his hair. His hair is not slicked down. It's dry. Now, when he's setting himself on fire, it looks like it's gelled and slicked down. It looks completely different. But he's got the one eye symbolism here. And if you're opposing the Illuminati, you're exposing the conspiracy, you're not going to be flashing their signs. Just saying. Very inconsistent. Very contradictory message. By the way, I went to that suno.com where you can, generate music with a click and a prompt. And I did do a song here about Maxwell Azarello. Let me just play it. It's called The Burning Hero. I won't torture you. This is obviously just completely prompted music, but
Maxwell Azarello, a hero with a cause. He set the world on fire, never hit a pause. He fought for justice and the rights of all.
Let me get to the final chorus where it says he barbecued himself. It says he barbecued himself to light up the way. A beacon in the darkness, forever he'll stay.
Forever stay. He barbecued himself to light up the way. A beacon in the darkness.
Anyway, I've been checking out some of this new tech, and it's pretty amazing. And it really is something we have to consider now. It expands the capabilities of the average person to produce content, but also this stuff is in the hands of those who are, purveying these illusions. And it made me think about this manifesto of Alex Ye, or Andrea Ye, another trans shooter. And again, they made up the trans shooter thing because bowl cut shooters with Nazi leanings weren't all that scary to the right. So they had to make a new devil to scare the right wing. So again, the trans shooter is to the right, with the bowl cut shooter is to the left. Well, you have this new one out of Maryland, Alex Ye, now Andrea Ye. The name is Ye, which is also very interesting. Here's a few headlines, and the right-wing sites are going to focus on this: transgender teen arrested for school shooting plot. But regular news, mainstream news, are trying to downplay it. Oh, here's one: New York Post: trans teen allegedly plotted school shooting. But I'm looking at the manifesto, and let me just read you some parts from it, because I'm suggesting that this is a Chat GPT manifesto. It's 129 pages. And since when does a high schooler write 129 pages? Here's some excerpts. Quote, I've considered shooting up my former elementary school because little kids make easier targets. Ye wrote. Remember I mentioned earlier how Tucker sent the shooter? Anyway, so Ye wrote, I run the risk of getting attacked or tackled midway through by high school students. I hated elementary school. The teachers were evil, and the other students were little a-holes. I got in trouble, had to sit during resets, blah, blah, blah. Perfect revenge. Anyway, it is really Chat GPT-ish, like kind of generic. Like, write me a manifesto about someone who was bullied in school. Goes on to say, Ye sent messages and said that too many people had been basically, yes, making fun of her. But here's the next part. This is the part that I think is also standing out to me, because it's been really stabby recently. There's been a lot of stabbing psyops. Ye said her ultimate goal is, quote, to set the world record for the most amount of kills, and that she would decapitate her victims with a knife. So there you go. Bringing the knife into it. All right, let's continue here. If you haven't heard, again, the Alex Ye story, I'm just now looking for the manifesto. I found some excerpts, but 129 pages. I'm thinking Chat GPT. What else could explain it? Okay, now this is kind of interesting. This was sent to me by a quote normie. Look, a lot of normies are hitting me up about this psyop, and this person said that they were watching CNN, and at 1 minute and 24 seconds, they said something really strange. Quote, we were there to capture the terrifying video. And he says, if they knew beforehand, they didn't try to stop him, were they just there to film it? So let me go ahead and play. CBS News, this is from 3 days ago. Man sets himself on fire near the Trump hush money. Here we go. 124. Okay, pay attention to what they're saying here, because it's suggestive that this was like they were expecting it.
Jerika Duncan is there on the scene now. Jerika, what more can you tell us? I know details are still coming in at this point.
Yeah, this just happened not that long ago, and I can tell you right now, based on what I'm looking at, is a bunch of investigators in the very spot from the video that I saw from our producer, Luisa Garcia, who was there to capture this terrifying video of someone appearing to have set themselves on fire. It is unclear the condition.
Now, she was there to capture it. Was that her primary purpose? I don't know if that was inferred. It sounds like it, but probably not. But regardless, the fact that someone who normally just consumes the news is now listening to it critically because they don't trust it, I think is progress. And the discussion then, of course, brings in the question of fakeability. Now, recently, I've been talking about low information believers, and we got into a conversation about this with a group of friends about whether or not people will find it convincing that Mad Mike Hughes, the daredevil, died in that rocket crash. And what separates this from any psyop is that this was a friend of several of us who knew him for several years and had attended rocket launches, aborted attempts, and the successful one. So there wasn't really any room there to just say this was some made-up thing and it was a hoax for TV. But it was an interesting conversation / debate, because it raised the question, how we make our claims. How do we decide if something is, quote, fake or not? When do we rule out the possibility it's real, or it could be real? I mean, there's fakeability, but then there's also a few other factors to consider. And so I made this distinction between, informed non-belief, like I know why I don't believe that, and uninformed non-belief. And the uninformed non-belief is not the same. These are qualitatively different stances. One is prejudiced. I don't believe what's on the news. Okay? Well, what about how do you define real or fake? How do you explain why you don't believe it? If it's just a knee-jerk opposition, is that really a place of discernment? Whereas I can tell you why I believe it's fake. So, as an example, I brought up panda bears. There are people who say they don't believe in panda bears, and I'm saying you don't really believe that. Like you can't believe they're not real. You're making a bad faith claim. Like if I say I don't believe in the sun, debate me. It's like, no, your claim is obviously in contradiction to available evidence. So if I'm trying to argue there's no sun, you can just rightfully ignore me. I can't possibly believe that. But when it comes to something like panda bears, there are people who are discussing this at length and suggesting there's no panda bears. But they're making their assessment based upon a few clips and some conjecture. So a conspiracy theory and some clips. But if you only listen to that sales pitch, then you might actually buy it. And what I'm mentioning here kind of refers back to what I said earlier about the frame of reference. How they set the frame of reference and they exclude stuff they don't want you to see, so you agree with or you choose from a limited selection. And their selection excludes stuff that is inconvenient or incompatible with the worldview they're selling you. So in this case, if someone's going to say, I think panda bears are fake, they're going to show you a guy in a panda costume and a few unbelievable clips. But they're not going to show you a panda at a vet, a panda being perhaps fed and or having some kind of bodily function. Pandas attacking people. Pandas can be brutal. I mean, if you try to hug a panda to prove your theory, and none of them do this, none of these individuals go out to debunk their own claims. So they're not even treating it like it's falsifiable. I mean, you should be trying to disprove your own theory. But if one of them went in there and hugged a panda bear, they would likely, if they survive, they would be maimed. Panda bears have been known to bite people's feet off. I mean, they would have to follow a blood trail to find your corpse. So my point of it is, again, this claim that pandas don't exist can only be made if you're deliberately ignoring available evidence. If you haven't called a zoo, if you haven't consulted a textbook, then what is the basis for your claim? But what's even worse, because it's a bad faith claim, what's worse are people who find it believable. Oh yeah, I don't believe in pandas now. That makes sense to me. Well, it's like, okay, there's something wrong with your operating system if you can just so flippantly say that this is not real. So again, that's not the same thing as auto-hoaxing. These are qualitatively different things. I would call that auto-disbelief or low information disbelief. Well, anyway, it's just a coincidence because this is recently been brought up again. Here's Owen Benjamin. Now, I'll say this. If he was just roasting panda bears, this is funny. Like, this is comedy. He's roasting panda bears. But I'm not really targeting him or his claim because he's just a comedian. But I want to show you some of the comments, and they're kind of illustrative, I think, of people's attitudes towards conspiracy theories today.
There's been as many pandas living in the wilderness of China as there have been Shih Tzus living in the wilderness of China. But I also believe that there are animals that are pandas. They're lab grown. They're lab grown, ridiculous animals. And why would they lie? Why would they? There's a million.
Now, he's advanced on his conversation here because he used to say they were fake or they were Jews in costumes trying to get people's money. But now he's saying that these are lab grown and that they couldn't survive. And he has his reasons for why he doesn't believe they exist or they're lab grown or they didn't used to exist. But I'm going through the responses to this. And look, this was made popular recently by someone who's actually in China, a TikToker. But anyway, new conspiracy unlocked. Another one here says, I spent 3 hours scouring the internet looking for historical references or art depicting pandas in Chinese archives. There were none. Now, it's worth mentioning that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Just because you don't have evidence for every single thing doesn't mean the thing isn't real or didn't happen. But I have come across instances of um, seemingly terms or words to describe what could be a panda bear. But my point of it is, new conspiracy unlocked. The people talking about it are describing this as, like this guy says, the first non-threatening conspiracy I've come across in a while. Nice relief. So they like this. Now, I'm suggesting that this could be an active measure. Flatlander says, what would be the purpose of faking pandas? No explanation given. Why would they say why would they fake pandas? There's no explanation that I find to be really coherent here. And they are fakeable. You can fake them in the movies. You can wear a panda costume. They're not fakeable at scale. Every zoo, if you're going to make that claim, and it's not on me to debunk it, because any extraordinary claim without evidence can be dismissed without evidence, Hitchens' razor. So if you're going to assert these things don't exist, elephants don't exist, there's no sun, be my guest, make these assertions, but I can just ignore them. I don't have to debunk them. But I don't even think they're fakeable at scale. But this is very similar, I think, to the birds are fake conspiracy theory. And that was put out there to discredit people calling school shootings fake. And guess who started the birds are fake? It wasn't some flat earther. No, it was a Parkland High School student. So again, my point being, the reason for the conspiracy theory is cognitive sabotage. The reason for the conspiracy theory is, if anything, an active measure against truthers. It really is that. And it's part of discrediting people. And look, you're discreditable if you can fall for something like that. That's why I'm discussing these things in the first place. It's about your frame of reference, cherry-picked information. That's not enough. It's like, oh, look, we got these 5 videos, make your decision. And so if you're a true skeptic, you'll say, let me suspend judgment until I can get some more info. But if you're making your decision immediately, then you can be misled. And this is how they get you with every single fake news story. They rush you to accept it as true, and then you add on more facts later as they arrive. But my point being is you have to really suspend judgment and not trust that the person is making an honest claim. Like the news media, are they making honest claims? Well, they may think they are, but they're not. Similarly, with these conspiracy theorists, maybe they may not know exactly, they may not be fully aware of the logical fallacies behind their different propositions, but they're victims of active measures if they're still propagating beliefs that have no factual basis, but that are spread through mostly, I would say, logical fallacies. I mean, this is like the Mandela effect. Every Mandela effect is a binary. Reality's shifting, everything's changing, but it only has one alternate version. No, it wouldn't work that way. If reality's fluid, then you would have 50 different versions of the Monopoly Man. It wouldn't just be monocle or not. Mango Penguin says penguins aren't real, just wait. Some people have said that. And their evidence is a few clips where penguins look unbelievable and some examples of animatronic penguins. So these are animatronic. These ones look fake, therefore they're all fake. So another part of it that I find interesting or explanatory is they take one example and then extrapolate they must all be this way. So there's also a stereotyping. So, oh, look, this sample group is like this, therefore they are all like this. And I kind of find that notable that the people following certain channels would echo these ideas so readily because they seem to follow a lot of other stereotypes as well. But let's move on from that. I'm just bringing this thing up because, of course, low information non-believers are not auto-hoaxers. We're not in the same category. This is excellent. This is a clip showing hair on the space station compared to hair in a parabolic zero-G flight. As you can imagine, the hair on the flight is moving around, waving around, It's wild. And then on the left, the hair is just sticking up like it's a lot of hairspray. I've been talking about this juxtaposition and why it needs to be done, and people need to compare the two for themselves in the context of the new ISS movie, in which none of the astronauts have any hair that is standing up. No loose hairs in the ISS movie. I was like, how are they going to fake it? CGI? Hairspray? Nope, they just slicked it back. They knew we were watching. Many more examples of that. Okay, I'm going through some comments, and we're just about out of time here. It's Glerf Day 2022. Peter Heinlein on X wrote this. Tucker Carlson was asked a few months ago if he thought the Earth was flat. His response was, I'm open to anything. How could I not be? That's not critical thinking or open-mindedness. That is pandering to idiots. That's a refusal to offend idiots. Tucker knows idiots are a core part of his new audience, and he won't risk losing a single one of them. People who don't have the ability to say Earth is round when asked shouldn't be taken seriously, much less be leaders of conservative thought. So here he's referring to Alex Stein bringing up the flat Earth question to Tucker Carlson. And Tucker saying, well, we'll listen to this and then we'll...
Smart, but I talked to this guy, Eddie Bravo, who's good friends with Joe Rogan, and they give me these ideas, and they say that there's this thing called the ice wall and that the Earth might be flat. What do you think about the flat Earth theory, Tucker?
Well, I'm open to anything, but I just know
that's it. Cut the soundbite.
How could I not be open to anything at this point? I mean, there's been so much deception that...
Okay, well, he's probably not open to fake shootings. He's probably not open to CGI special effects enhanced reality. Probably not open to fake space. So he's not open to anything. And no, you should be able to say that proposition is ridiculous on the face of it. The globe is ridiculous on the face of it. The domed enclosed flat Earth model with ice walls is ridiculous on the face of it. We do need some standards. The abolition of all standards is not a step forward. And even though they may claim, oh, I'm open-minded, I'll entertain anything, of course, they only entertain anything within their box. They certainly don't go into the areas where we are, because of course they would be out of a job. And of course they are part of maintaining the infrastructure of the world stage. Low information disbelief does not need to be challenged, it needs to be ignored. Informed disbelief is a weapon against the matrix. All right, have a good night, everyone. I have to get back to a couple of things. I'm listing a whole lot of artwork on eBay, and it's one of the ways I'm keeping the channel flowing. We have less than a month before our lawsuit against Google LLC and YouTube, so things should be getting more interesting in the coming weeks here. And I'll keep you all appraised of the changes that are going on there. We'll continue to talk about this stuff. Here's an article. Horrifying scene as panda bites tourist's finger off in China. So what happened there? Did they not pay the guy in the panda costume enough money? He got fed up. But low information disbelief, that's a very key concept to auto-hoaxing. Again, because we have to make a distinction between automatically rejecting and suspending judgment. We'll have more on the Burning Man as it arrives. I've been finding a lot of interesting stuff as well from other content creators who still believe that it's real or that it's a sacrifice, but regardless, I will research really anyone's content, even if we don't agree on conclusions, just because I appreciate other people's research, and then we can arrive at our own conclusions. So anyway, this is Chief Crow, Auto Hoax. I'll see you all tomorrow.
I'm on Auto Hoax, and it feels so good. You just auto believe everything like I knew that you would. In my dream, you know I ain't got time. For another crisis actor with 96.
96, y'all.